All right, you ready for this?
Ready.
Chris Newmarker, how are you, sir?
Doing well, Tom. Doing well. How you doing, man?
We are back. It's good to be back in the podcast saddle after having last week off. It was a great week. Saw my oldest boy graduate. Pretty cool experience. Yeah.
Congrats.
Congrats to him.
My gosh, time just flies by. It's unbelievable.
There are these moments in parenthood where you kind of, it happens, and then like one of those good movies where everything connects at the end, like, oh, that's why that, then that, all these things that kind of tie together. I kind of had that sense, like just seeing him complete this milestone. It just brought you back to all the things you helped them work with and overcome, and you're like, oh, it worked. Like it came together. So very
fantastic.
Unique moment of parenthood because there's not a lot of opportunities, as you know, to really assess and to say like, whoo, and take a deep breath. Right? It's just kind of a constant spinning, like, okay, we got this one done. Let's go on to the next crisis.
Exactly.
So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Like to actually be like, this worked out well.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
And there's more work coming.
Oh yeah.
But it's good to take a break. So no, it's awesome. Definitely a good week. And I've got these boys going to Purdue. I've got my Purdue shirt on, and I see you've got your Ohio State shirt on. A little.
I just felt a little like, Buckeyes pride today for some reason. So I have my Ohio State t-shirt.
So we've got some new things to kibitz
Rocking
about.
The Big Ten.
Whenever I got to check the schedule, I imagine I don't know anything about college sports, so I'll be a good bandwagon jumper on her, as good as anyone else. So
I say it's okay. I mean, it's pretty simple. Usually, most of the time, if Ohio State plays Purdue, they win in football. So I mean, it's all right. It's okay. It's all right.
I smell a podcast wager coming. Chris Newmarker, I will send you a dozen Dunkin' Donuts, and you'll have to give me. Walleye, what do I get from you? I forget. What do you guys have? You have the pies. You have pies, right?
Yeah, I can send you pies.
Or you can send me something from Caribou Coffee. And their pastries aren't so good. Maybe a pound of Caribou Coffee.
We've got some really good coffee companies here. Maybe a nice craft beer. Maybe we could switch off.
Now we're talking. All right. You piqued my interest.
There you go. We could head down. I'll head down to the UPS store and send you a few cans.
It's gonna be fun. So all right. Well, Chris Newmarker, I guess business-wise, we're working on the DeviceTalks West agenda. We'll be opening up for registration next week.
Oh my gosh.
The agenda's come together nicely. Details are forthcoming, but registration will open up next week. We'll have the early bird special for $300 off, just like we did in Boston. So $395 versus $695. So I advise people not to wait. But of course, if they want to wait for the agenda, I understand. Confirmed keynotes, absolutely 100% confirmed keynotes. Or Andy Pierce of Stryker. I have other keynotes at like 90% that I want to tell you who they are, but they haven't said yes, absolutely. Sign me up, but they're committed. So those are coming.
It's gonna be good.
Yeah, it'll be good. It'll be a great couple of days. It'll be a lot of fun.
Awesome.
Yep. So fantastic. All right. So other than that, no Device Talks Tuesdays next week, and let's roll into the Newmarker's Newsmakers.
Let's do it. The Newmarker's Newsmakers. Well, number 5 on the list, we have No Labs unveiling their first generation prototype of a non-invasive glucose monitor. This uses their bio-RFD technology, which is like a spectroscopy. I give up. It's a technology that directs electromagnetic energy through a substance or material. So this is like to catch a unique molecular signature in order to non-invasively get a glucose reading. There are companies out there that have some of this tech kind of out there already. They say they're like going to be driving toward doing a 510, an actual FDA clearance of the technology, and that this first generation prototype can now be like used in research, so they can like start to do the high quality data collection they would need to actually get something cleared with the FDA. And it's worth noting, over the years, especially in the last decade, there were times where you've seen these companies with like some kind of box or whatever that, they say can, non-invasively measure all this stuff. And, you gotta, did it really do what they, said it was going to do? I mean, definitely, I think, these studies are going to be kind of like the proof in the pudding. Like, can this tech actually work?
So no labs, this is KNOW labs.
Yes, as in to know thyself. Yes.
Exactly. Cool stuff. Let's roll on to number 4, Chris Newmarker.
Hey, number 4 on the list is Medtronic. They've got their first Chief Technology and Innovation Officer.
That's great. Well, you had interviewed Nitin Goyal from Zimmer Biomet.
Yeah, a really good interview.
Yeah. So, do we have an understanding of what the purview of a Chief Technology and Innovation Officer will be?
Well, they're gonna, talking about this new Chief Technology Innovation Officer, like leveraging his extensive experience on technology development and execution across industries, and going to become a member of the executive committee. They tapped somebody from Amazon. It's Ken Washington. He was their VP and GM of consumer robotics. Like kind of one theme we've had is that like these, there's been really big companies like Medtronic, Johnson, Siemens Healthineers. It's been challenging to compete with Intuitive in the soft tissue robotic space, and Medtronic's still going with it with the Hugo robot. But they chose. I would say something that they chose a Chief Technology Innovation Officer who's got robotics expertise. Like I think that sends a message. And before that, he was a Chief Technology Officer at a Ford Motor Company.
That's an interesting connection.
Which cars. I'd probably say that automobiles aren't as heavily regulated as, say, like airplanes, but there's still a lot of regulations around making of automobiles. I mean, they don't want.
He also spent time at Lockheed Martin in numerous
there you go.
leadership
He's got
roles.
the airplane experience.
A lot of regulation there for sure.
Yes,
Chief
you don't want something to
Technology,
break on an airplane.
Chief Privacy Officer, and VP of the Advanced Technology Center in Lockheed Martin Space Systems Company.
So he knows how to innovate in a highly regulated environment.
Yeah. So Medtronic is continuing to draw expertise from other industries. We had Q Delara, the head of the diabetes group, on the podcast just last week on the Medtronic Talks podcast just last week, and she came to Medtronic from Honeywell, where she was president and CEO of Honeywell Connected Enterprise, and she had made the case that it's an easy transition because it's all about just managing processes and tracking details, and it's a great bit of overlap in skill sets. So I know we traditionally look for other medtech industries, but as medtech becomes more tech, as much as med, you're going to draw from these other industries. And we also, of course, had Martin Buehler from J&J at DeviceTalks Boston giving a keynote about J&J's robotics program. And Martin Buehler famously was with Disney and been with Medtronic before that. And he was director of research at iRobot. So
wow.
He was director of robotics at Boston Dynamics. He was involved, I think, in the SPOT program there. So once again, MedTech is drawing expertise from other industries, which I think is cool. I think it's
very
great.
cool.
All right, Chris Newmarker, let's roll on to number 3 on the Newmarker's Newsmakers.
Well, number 3 on the list, we've got United Healthcare announcing that they plan to cover the Eversense E3 continuous glucose monitor from Senseonics. I mean, United Healthcare, one of the largest health insurers in the United States, headquartered in my neck of the woods, like around the Twin Cities here. But this device, I mean, it was approved by the FDA in February, implantable, 180 days, requires just 2 sensor insertion and removal procedures a year, and then it's just going to be streaming, glucose data to you. And the company was describing this as like an important milestone, saying that with United Healthcare, covering it now, they said they're nearing all insured adults in the United States having access to this to their Eversense E3 CGM.
Well, that's great news for Senseonics. I mean, to get the FDA approval earlier this year and reimbursement now, and of course, it's great news for folks who are using their devices. So
yeah.
once again, this field continues to explode. All right,
I mean, just to basically have a device that, you can get it for half a year and like not really, have to, remember whether you're like putting in a new sensor or whatnot. It's just there and giving you the data you need.
Well, that's got to be a huge load off the mind. You hear about just how people with diabetes are forced to make hundreds of decisions a day and forced to really actively manage their disease. So anything that can use tech to take that load off, just has to be, in addition to managing the disease, just has to be so much less stress. So,
absolutely.
Stuff. All right. Well, let us roll on to number 2 in the Newmarker's Newsmakers, Chris.
Well, this news was from last week, but since you were gone, we're doing kind of like a 2-week Newsmakers here. But the number 2 on the list was Hologic CEO Stephen McMillan. He's going to chair the board at Illumina. He's going to be their non-executive board chair. And I put out a post on LinkedIn about it. Asking people what they thought this meant for Illumina, and kind of the responses I was getting was like they've got one of the best CEOs in medtech. People were saying, on their side, helping them with the business.
That's great news for Illumina, and of course we've seen some of this crossover of Ford and medtech. Mike Mahoney is on Baxter's board, so it's not unusual. I also see Edwards Life Sciences CFO Scott Ullum is on a new seat there at Illumina. So
exactly, this comes after the activist investor Carl Icahn's nominee Andrew Teno knocked out the previous board chair off the board on the shareholder vote. So there was definitely some drama there, though. The Illumina CEO Frank D'Souza survived another challenge, and that kind of shareholder vote. And
Illumina is still trying to get final approval for the acquisition of Grail, and it's appealing the FTC Commission's order to divest Grail. So lots going on there at Illumina, and no doubt Steve McMillan will provide a steady hand as its new non-executive chair. All right, Chris Newmarker, what is number 1 on this week's Newmarker's Newsmakers?
Number 1 on the list. We have some tough news this week. It's the FDA, made public the warning letter that they've sent to iRhythm, that it was the subject of a SEC disclosure at the end of May from iRhythm, and it definitely looks like they have some issues to work through with the FDA when it comes to their Zio AT ECG monitoring system.
Sure.
But definitely in this case, it just it looks like they talking with iRhythm about reporting requirements. They're also saying that that they were marketing the Zio AT for unapproved indications, which it would require another 510K. So I was actually just looking at a analyst note about all this from BTIG, and the analysts over there were noting that this doesn't affect the Zio XT or the Zio monitor business. So they're still bullish on iRhythm's portfolio, but they said that there's definitely they trimmed their valuation around what they said was uncertainty around the the warning letter and the Zio AT commercial outlook for now, and so hopefully we'll hear more from iRhythm about how they're looking to work through this.
All right. Well, a rough ending to the Newsmakers, Chris Newmarker, but thanks for putting this list together.
Yep. We do it every week, and if you want to get more medtech news and insights, go to massdevice.com.
And of course, you can also subscribe to the Fast 5 podcast.
And Fast 5 podcast, exactly.
You can't wait for these wrap-ups. At the end of the week, you can hear Sean Hooley and Daniel Kirsch give their daily updates on the big news of the day.
It's a great start to my day. I mean, Danielle and Sean are doing like a fantastic job.
Well, Ariel Sutton, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Tom. Pleasure to be here.
I'm excited to learn about it. Imperative Care. It's one of those companies I keep hearing a bunch about, and excited to learn about the neurovascular part of the business that you're leading. Maybe we can hit a little bit upon the vascular part if you can share a bit upon that and about the company's origins. But first, let's focus on your origins. Errol, how did you find your way to the medical device industry?
Sure. Well, one of the things I've learned in med device is the path is never straight in the journey. And I would say my entrance into med device follows that same tune. When I was little, I thought I would become a doctor. And when I hit my junior year in high school, my math teacher pulled me aside after class one day and recommended that I do an engineering program for women over the summer. And after that program, I decided I would major in materials engineering when I went to Brown.
Wow. What was it about engineering that was a hit with you?
Yeah. You know, what I learned through engineering is that it's really collaborative, and the best solutions really come from a team working together. And I saw that in college too. I thought I would still become a doctor, even though I was majoring in engineering.
Oh, interesting.
And what was interesting is by junior year, I noticed that the collaboration amongst the team was much more enjoyable than the cutthroat environment in pre-med. So after I graduated, I had a Fulbright fellowship, and I spent a year in Israel, and I was doing research on blood substitutes. So, you know, I was still following the medical path, but being in a lab, you know, all week long, ultimately, I decided when I came back that I wanted to put my engineering practice to work. So I joined Texas Instruments and worked on a manufacturing floor, working on clad metals, putting my materials engineering background to work. I had a hard hat, steel-toed boots.
Nice.
And probably about as opposite from a clean room as you can get. I did that for several years and decided to go back to business school. And when I went to business school, you know, the companies come on campus and tell you about the different products that they're making and why you should come work for them. I remember when I heard Ginger Graham and Art Collins and, you know, all the leaders of the med device companies, I was hooked.
I'm curious if you still had the strong interest toward being a doctor, and you were, or at least in medicine. You did the Fulbright scholarship in Israel. Had you had your mind a biomedical engineering path at some point, and did something take you off of that, or how did you get to work at Texas Instruments and wear a hard hat?
Yeah, so I went to Brown University for undergrad, and at the time, I think it's changed since I graduated, but at the time, they didn't have a very big biomedical engineering program.
Yeah.
And so it had been recommended to me that, you know, staying true to, you know, one of the core engineering practices would be the best path. So that's how I ended up choosing materials engineering.
Sounds like your career would be likely would take a different path if you were headed to college even 10 years ago or 5 years ago with all the biomedical.
Absolutely. And to just share with you, you know, when I was an engineer, there was only about 20% women in my class, which maybe I'm dating myself with that comment, but you know, today I think it's closer to 50-50, but you know, at that time it was still heavily male dominated.
Interesting. So, and you made the choice to go to business school. I'd like to just kind of delve into that for a moment, because we're talking more broadly about the workforce situation in medtech, where positions are being cut and engineers who are sort of looking to further their career. What was it about going to business school that was appealing to you? Did you know you wanted to get into something beyond engineering? Did you think it would support your engineering thing? I'm guessing you're going to tell me that you're still an engineer. You're just a non-practicing engineer. What was it about the decision to go to business school? And is that some advice that you'd give to an engineer now who's looking to sort of open career paths to themselves in the future?
Yeah, before I answer that, by the way, I'm so far from engineering, I don't even use that word anymore. God forbid somebody should ask me an engineering question.
Is there an engineer on the plane? You just look around like,
I'm hiding.
Not here.
But, you know, what did encourage me to go back to business school is really two things. One is I did know I wanted to change fields, you know, it was really industrial products that I was working in. And, you know, I did still have that inkling for something in medical. So that drove me to go back to business school. And I also thought it would be really valuable to build some of the foundational skills. And that really has helped me accelerate my career, post business school, having a solid foundation in a lot of the business practices. And you meet a tremendous number of people from different experiences, which is always really sort of eye-opening to hear about different industries that your classmates have worked in and different experiences that they've had.
Interesting. Yeah, that network that you get from business school is really the thing you walk away from. I think that continues to pay dividends, right?
100%.
Yeah. You went to LifeScan at some point. Was that after business school? I'm seeing a 2-year gap there in your LinkedIn profile. Was that the timing, or did that come after?
So right after business school, I joined J&J, and that's also another opportunity to build a really strong educational background. Everybody knows J&J is well known for their training. And I was at J&J for about a year and learned about the opportunity to go to an early stage company. And one of the things that I do think is incredibly valuable early in your career is to have the experience of working for a larger company and a smaller company, because both are great, but each person, has different sort of interests and fits better, I think, in one size versus another. So when I went to a smaller company, I love the, jump in head first and try and do a little bit of everything. And there's not really a lot of training. It's more learn on the job. And I really loved my experience at Fox Hollow, because I went in with that engineering background with the focus on upstream and left with a lot of experience in the downstream.
So what was that conversation like? I don't know who you would talk about your career back then, but you're at J&J, if you stay there for the most part, you've got a good path, but there's this company, Fox Hollow, which obviously had a lot of buzz there. And I don't know when you joined the company, but what convinced you to take a leap from the reasonably safe environs of a larger company to join the startup? Was it just to get more exposure, or did you see were you pursuing something else?
Yeah, I went and I interviewed for the job, and I met Leslie Trigg, who you've spoken with.
Big fan.
She's electric, right? So yeah. I think the opportunity that she presented for how this could really change my career trajectory. And, when I started hearing about the atherectomy market and the ability to really save patients' legs, and I'll never forget, in my first week on the job, coming from J&J, my first question is, where's the market research report? And Leslie says, you don't want to read the market research report. The market doesn't even exist in the market research report. So, we really built the market at Fox Hollow. And one of the themes of the different companies that I've gone to is it's really always just been about growing the technology and really helping more patients. And I've been blessed with really fantastic technologies and, more importantly, fantastic teams, because I think you can have a mediocre technology that can really take off with the appropriate training. And I've seen great technologies that really don't go very far without the right team to help physicians.
That's interesting. And looking at your next stop, well, you were part of the merger with EV3, you were director of marketing there, but then you went to Access Closure, and your path sort of personifies conversations I've had lately with folks about choosing the next place to work, like finding a place to work where there's someone there who can sort of, like Leslie did, I'm sure, for you, and like the CEO, was Fred Kosavi CEO of Access Closure?
He was.
Yeah, I mean, do you see that as an opportunity? Like, I need to work with this person because I just know if I connect and do a good job with this person, that this is someone you want to be aligned with.
Yeah. Interestingly, I was early enough in my career that I'm not sure I had that full realization. Yeah. I do remember meeting Fred, and Fred's a really special person. He's an incredible businessman, but more importantly, he's actually an incredible human being. He really cares about people, and you feel that when you talk to him. So I remember when I first sat down with him, and, he said, there's really two focuses in my life, my work and my family. And I was just, starting my family at the time. And that just really resonated for me. And, Access Closure for me was an opportunity to go even earlier stage. So when I joined Fox Hollow, they had just gone public. Their
okay.
sales were about 30 million. And when I joined Access Closure, the product had just launched. So that was an amazing opportunity. And now at Imperative Care, when I joined, it was pre-launch. So progressively, I've started with companies early and earlier and really had the opportunity to shape the strategy and shape that launch.
Interesting. Can you learn what you need to learn without going through that process? If you had jumped to another company that had already launched a product and had $30 million in sales, do you think you'd be able to understand what it is to go even earlier than that to launch a product? Or do you really need to kind of be in the trenches of that and experience it to learn everything you need to learn about just starting out, just launching a product?
I definitely think there's pieces that you leverage from your previous experiences. And I think it's one of the things that I've noticed even when you're hiring team members, right? The more sort of different experiences that an individual has, they can leverage and they can pull from, and it really shapes, right, their actions and, and the creativity. So do I think you need it? No, but I think each of these different experiences help shape us.
Interesting. I appreciate your indulging me my my questions. I find this career stuff really interesting. So Access Closure to Cardinal Health, is that part of the acquisition?
That was an acquisition.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what was your thinking there? Did you have the small company bug? You're like, I'll do this for now, but I know where I'm going. Or did you say, let's give the big company a try again and see where that goes?
Yeah, well, the last big company I had been at was Johnson & Johnson, right, as an associate product manager. So I thought, wow, what a wonderful opportunity to, be at a VP level in a large company and really understand how do the bigger companies think about acquisitions and growth and really sit on the other side of the table.
Sure.
Cardinal's health strategy at the time was to build out a interventional business. So they started with vascular closure by acquiring Access Closure. But then there was a decision made to really look whether we were going to build our own portfolio or whether we were going to acquire a portfolio. And so I was instrumental in that process in doing that analysis and ultimately making the decision to acquire Cordis to bring in that portfolio. So, I did that for a couple of years, but then, Fred reached out and, when the not CEO, but, Fred has an incubator where he's started 23 companies. And when he tells you he's so excited, he can't sleep because of the company that he's starting, it's a little hard to not want to follow.
Yeah, it's hard not to trust those instincts, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is a person who knows what he's talking about.
And at that point in my career, by the way, it was also right. I recognized, the importance of really working with people that you want to be working with, that you care about and they care about you.
Absolutely. No, that's essential to go to work and know every day that you're part of something positive that makes all the difference, especially to your point when you're spending time away from your family, which is the other priority. So with Imperative Care, let's talk a bit about the company. Where was Imperative Care when you joined, which from what I have here was 2016. Was it still in the very early stages?
Yeah, it was literally a drawing on a napkin when I sat down with
Don't
Fred.
get earlier than that. That's
which is what was so exciting to me, right? Like this was a opportunity to really work with Fred and shape this. And the company was really co-founded by, Fred, who's a serial entrepreneur, but also Nick Hopkins, who's a luminary in the neurointerventional space. And it started with this idea that you could take a larger catheter deeper in the brain to be closer to the clot, to remove the clot for ischemic stroke. And, nobody had been able to do that. It's an analogy to maybe think about is, if you're playing basketball, the probability of hitting the hoop, if you're shooting midcourt versus, doing a layup, our catheter is essentially, creating the layup so that you can easily remove that clot.
interesting.
So it started essentially with accessing the clot, but it's really evolved quite quickly into how do we create more access for patients? And so putting the patient at the center, thinking about, the onset of stroke all the way through to the recovery of stroke. And unfortunately, today, only 1 in 5 patients are being treated for a large vessel occlusion stroke. And, that's just unacceptable. Our technology a lot of the clinical data that's evolving in the space right now. There's some recent data that has expanded the patient population that can be treated. That'll probably take us from 1 in 5, to 2 in 5.
Mm-hmm.
The real game changer here is how do we get this to 4 and 5? And so, Fred and Nick really recognize that not only by us having, game-changing devices, but thinking about how we can open up that access for patients, expanded the vision to include things like robotics and detection. And then also, helping out patients who haven't achieved the best outcome through the procedure, really helping them through the recovery process as well. So it's a really broad vision. What I love about it is, the big companies have tried to achieve growth by, they sort of reach, a slowing with their current portfolio, and then they go out and either acquire or figure out, expansion. And Imperative Care is really doing this from the beginning. From the beginning, it was a built for purpose with this vision to think more expansively about bringing more care to more patients.
I want to get into the technology in a moment, but I like to just drill down on the 1 in 5. For some reason, I always thought the 1 in 5 number was tied more toward people weren't getting to a point where they could be treated in time to get treatment. Is that the bigger hurdle, or is the tall hurdle not having the technology to get to the clots and treat them safely?
It's actually a combination of the time as well as the access to the patient. So about close to 80 million Americans live farther than 20 miles from a hospital that can perform these procedures. So you have, time is brain in stroke. And so that time is incredibly important, but also getting a patient to a hospital where they can be treated, by a physician who is well-trained in these techniques and the technology is incredibly important. So, the stroke business that I'm leading is very much focused on the intervention itself and shortening time, but that's minutes, whereas the access for the patients is hours.
Interesting. So talk a bit about your technology in your approach. You have some cool videos on the website. People can check it out, and we'll have the link in the show notes. But what is noticeably different if someone looking at the video from Imperative Care's approach to some of the other approaches out there?
Sure. So Imperative Care, similarly to how we looked at the vision of the company in a more systematic approach, putting the patient at the center and thinking about the continuum of care. We've done that similarly for the interventional piece. So we really looked at this as access all the way through to clot capture to create a system. We didn't just come out with a single catheter. And so there's really 3 aspects that we've innovated. The first is access. So I spoke about that with the larger bore catheter, that the physicians are able to start the procedure to get closer to the clot. We call that intracranial access. Prior to our Zoom 88 access catheter, physicians were only really reaching the distal cervical, which is in the neck. And now they're actually able to go inside the brain.
Oh, wow.
With our Zoom 88. The second piece is we developed a series of catheters that are different sizes for the different vessels in the brain. So as you go further and further in the brain, the vessels become smaller. So we developed 4 different sized catheters, and they're all shaped differently than all the other catheters on the market. So most of the catheters have a flat tip, not most, all of the other catheters have a flat tip. And our Zoom catheter has a 60-degree angle. We call it our TRX tip. And that gives you more surface area so that the physicians can achieve what we call asymmetric clot engagement. So there's 2 pieces to getting the clot out of the brain. One is you have to get there with the catheter, but then the second is the catheter actually has to be able to remove that clot. So with this tip that we have, we're seeing improved ability for the physicians to actually engage that clot and ultimately remove it. And then the third aspect that we innovated is the clot capture itself. So once the physician gets the catheter to the clot, they have a pump that sits outside that actually literally vacuum. It's almost like a vacuum cleaner. It literally vacuums the clot out of the brain. And one of the innovations that we developed is called the Zoom pod. And so right outside of the patient's body is a little filter. So when the clot comes out of the body, the physician immediately sees, they know that they've treated the patient and they're able
Mhm.
to turn off that pump and, and feel that success of knowing that they've removed that clot.
Interesting. So the catheters of the different sizes, and if I'm looking at the video correctly or was earlier, they fit inside of each other. So it's kind of like a telescoping effect of as the vessel gets narrower, the narrower catheter comes out to extend the reach. Okay.
Exactly. But the goal, with these devices is to continue to get and make these procedures easier and easier. So if we can do this with fewer devices, it's going to make it easier for the physicians to maneuver the devices, and it'll make the procedure faster.
And just so I understand the tip part, it would seem from your explanation, the flat tip, you're getting at the clot at its center, where with your 360, you're kind of getting it from the edges and pulling it out more evenly. Is that the benefit?
Exactly. And when you watch it on a video with the flat tip, the clot almost mushrooms around the catheter. And with the TRX tip, it literally almost folds into the catheter. So it does make a difference.
Interesting. So you're in the effort to make it easier, I imagine you're making it easier for those folks who are currently doing procedures. Removing these clots requires a great deal of skill that many people don't have. I imagine the interventionalists don't have, or at least it's something that is challenging. Is your hope that by developing an easier system that more interventionalists, more doctors will be able to perform these procedures, therefore you're sort of expanding the options for treatment?
Well, let me talk a little bit just about the actual accessing of the clot. So we talked about how the vessels get smaller and smaller, but what we didn't talk about is the tortuosity of these vessels. So these vessels can have 360 loops, 180 turns, often all of the above. And the sicker the patients, often the more tortuosity that you see in the vessel structure. So I would say in some ways, it's a beyond a skill issue, right? There's just a complexity in the anatomy. And so our goal is, how can we develop these catheters that they're soft enough to navigate this difficult tortuosity, but have the stiffness in the proximal so that the physician can push the catheters at the same time. So it's that complexity that makes these catheters really, really difficult, both to develop as well as manufacture.
Interesting. Okay. So let's talk a bit about the business. So you were recently promoted, you're senior vice president of the neurovascular business, correct?
General manager.
General manager, apologize. So structurally for the company, what does that mean in terms of your focus? Before it seemed as if your portfolio was under sort of one business, but now Imperative Care is going to target neurovascular and vascular differently. Is that what unfolding here?
Yeah, so it's really the evolution of the company. When we were talking about the vision, it did start with our interventional stroke business, and we needed to be focused, right? We only had a small team. So while we wanted to go after and attack robotics and, digital health, we only had a small team. So we did really need to focus. And what's evolved, over the past several years is that, in our stroke business, we've now treated over 25,000 patients, 1 in 3 aspiration catheters, amongst a sea of large players. 1 in 3 of catheters being pulled is an Imperative Care Zoom catheter. And so with that, success that we've seen in the interventional business, it's allowed us now to really begin to expand our other businesses. So the success that we were seeing with thrombectomy in the brain drove us to really say, well, let's take these same features, which I described to you, and see the success that we can also have in patients with DVT and PE. And it also allowed us to expand our focus on the broader continuum of care for stroke. So the way the company is structured now is that we have, our 2 commercial businesses of our stroke business and our vascular business. It's really more earlier stage programs when it comes to the robotics and the digital health.
Interesting. Yeah, and thank you. I was going to correct myself. The general manager of the stroke business, which gives you a broader charter than neurovascular, I would think. How do you approach the growth of this stroke business? Is it focusing on this one product or this one system? And I do want to get into the robotic stuff because you mentioned that twice, and that's very exciting. How do you see this business growing? Are you developing materials or products internally? Are you acquiring other businesses that sort of maybe, or other products that maybe complement what you're doing? What do you see like the future? What does the future look like for the stroke business?
Absolutely. Well, one of the reasons that I believe imperative care has had such great success is we really do start with the clinical need, Tom, and really trying to collaborate closely with the physicians to understand, what challenges that they're facing. And one of the things that we discovered early on for our stroke business is, the physicians want to be able to expect that they're going to get full reperfusion in the brain in as short time as possible. So it sounds like you went to our website, but we often talk about it as Tiki 3 in 10 minutes. We want the physicians to be able to wake up at 2 a.m. and expect that they'll be able to, go into the hospital, remove that clot to achieve, full reperfusion or Tiki 3, do that in 10 minutes, and then, get back home and get back to bed. That's not going to happen on every case, but if we can develop it that becomes the expectation, that's a huge advancement for this space. So all of the different technologies that we've been working on and developing have really been a focus towards how do we change that expectation for physicians. We're not there yet, but we're getting closer. And so the future technologies that we're looking at are continuing to strive towards that goal of the Tiki 3 in 10 minutes. And we've really developed internally the capability with our R&D team that we have this rapid iteration. So we get this feedback from the physicians, we iterate the product quickly, and then we're able to get a new generation. So a lot of our early technologies, we're already on, third, fourth generation. And that partnership with the physicians and the physicians seeing, their feedback turn into, products that are in their hands has been really powerful.
Interesting. Again, you mentioned robotics a couple of times. Do you have a robotics program internally that you're developing? Do you see an external application or company that you may be partnering with, or maybe you've already done my research? Where are you at with that?
Yeah, so we have a program we are developing internally. And if you look at a lot of the robotics programs out there, they're really looking at how do you develop a robot, right? And then they're looking at using others' instrumentation. Where we really see the success for imperative care is we have catheters that are becoming the standard of care, right? With 1 and 3 being pulled. And, we're continuing to innovate. So we have the access to the tools that are being used in these procedures and now have the advantage of really being able to take that same system approach that we used for removing the clot. And now we can apply that same system approach to how do we create a robot and catheter technology combined system that will allow more patients to be treated. Because, we talked about that 1 in 5 are being treated today. We see that advancing to 2 in 5 with our technology. With this robotic solution of changing the ability for patients to get that access, we believe we'll get this to 4 in 5 patients being treated.
Wow. So do you have and it's interesting, I see the parallels to, I know, work being done in the lung space, and it would seem like the accessing the outer part of the lung would be very similar to accessing the brain. It's tortuous and it's winding. What does your internal program look like at this point? Do you have a team of engineers working on it? Is it a large team, a small team? Can you give us any details on it?
Yeah, so we do have a good-sized team that is working on this program. We've really been able to attract developers who have worked on other robotic platforms. And so the beauty of this team is that we're combining the expertise of those who know stroke well, and those who have worked on other, med device robotic platforms to really be able to bring together and marry the best of the both worlds, because we do really believe that this is the future.
Fantastic. Well, this is exciting stuff, and there's stuff that I'm learning about that I wasn't anticipating. Well, this is great. I just want to follow up on 2 more points. You mentioned earlier on how you're working with surgeons. Clearly, that's something that's done a lot in the medical device industry. Do you feel that your cooperation, your collaboration is different or more intense, perhaps, than elsewhere? How are you handling that?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, Nick Hopkins was one of our co-founders, right? So there was from really day one a strong connection established, with the medical community. And, Nick brought along several other physicians that have been part of our, what we call founding clinical advisors. And, now that we're on the market, we've developed an even broader set of physicians, that we partner with. And what we hear from physicians is that the partnership with Imperative Care is really different. And I think it has to do with this rapid iteration process that we've set up. We had a physician visiting just about a month ago, and he said, I often give companies feedback on the products, but it's very rare that I actually see that feedback come to fruition.
Oh, interesting.
And what I really find special about Imperative Care is that I provide that feedback, and I'm blown away that, 6 months later, I have a new product in my hand that has integrated some of those changes. So, that's something that we really value, and we want to continue to preserve, as the company grows.
Great. And final question, again, you mentioned you mentioned robotics. The other thing you said was digital health, which is obviously another hot space, off and on hot space. But anyway, how does that fit into Imperative Care strategy? What do you have available there?
Yeah, well, we've been talking about the focus on patient outcomes, but not everybody does have, an excellent outcome. And so there are not a lot of solutions today for patients who are leaving the hospital. And if you look at the statistics, about 50% of stroke patients are readmitted to the hospital within the first year. So, that's a staggering number. There's a real opportunity to help the patients after they're discharged. And so we have a program called Can Do. The can do is like patients can do, or that motivation or belief, oftentimes if folks are leaving the hospital with disability, there can be a feeling of can't do. And we want to be able to change that. So our Can Do program marries a nurse navigator with the patient for the first 90 days. And we're really helping the patient navigate their care so that they can improve their outcome in that initial period after experiencing the stroke.
Wow. I mean, how do you sort of incorporate that into a broader device company framework? It's a different type of business.
It is a different type of business. And it goes back to the earlier comments I was making about how this company was really built to last from the beginning, right? This vision of what we're trying to create. And as a result, we're being flexible with our structure. So recently, actually, the Can Do business was spun out because digital health operates differently than med device. So, we're structuring the company in a way that allows all of these different efforts to really accelerate and grow the bigger vision.
Fantastic. Well, I've learned a ton, both about your career, but also Imperative Care. Both really excellent topics, Ariel. Thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Such a pleasure, Tom. Thank you.
All right, Chris Newmarker, that is a wrap. How can folks find you out there in social media land?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Chris Newmarker, like a new marker.
All right. And I'm on LinkedIn as well, Tom, Salemi. Once again, we'd like you to subscribe. Well, I'm sorry, Chris. Once again, we'd like people to
give a like, follow, subscribe.
That's right. Like, follow, and or subscribe to the DeviceTalks Podcast Network. You'll receive future episodes of the DeviceTalks Weekly Podcast, Intuitive Talks, Stryker Talks, Boston Scientific Talks. And next week, we're hoping to we will roll out Abbott Talks. So we've got a whole new slew of great news coming from those aforementioned companies. So make sure you do subscribe to the DeviceTalks Podcast Network, and make sure you share this podcast on LinkedIn. And when you do, connect with Chris Newmarker, with Mass Device, with DeviceTalks, with myself. We want to be part of that conversation, and we'd love for more people to find the podcast. So we really do appreciate it when you share. So all right. Other than that, we're working on the agenda for DeviceTalks West. It's happening October 18th and 19th at the Santa Clara Convention Center. Registration opens up next week, and we'll be posting details on the agenda over the coming weeks. So stay tuned. Go to west.devicetalks.com for more information on that, or you can just go to devicetalks.com and follow the links, and you'll get there that way as well. And while you're there, check out some very cool podcasts and Device Talks Tuesdays. Lots of great Device Talks Tuesdays coming up. All right, Chris, great job. Thanks again.
Good times. Enjoy the summer, man. Like, pool season is here.
Yeah, that's right. And we're going to start our grill. And I smoked a couple of briskets for my boys' graduation party. Not too shabby, if I say it myself. It was darned tasty.
I was at a Twins game 2 weeks ago, and I
Oh boy.
got some like a grilled, which I mean I know all our Cleveland colleagues, our parent company's based in Cleveland, but it was nice watching the Twins beat the Guardians, 1-0, and had a nice grilled Karmachuk's sausage. Makes me think I need to like drive over to Northeast Minneapolis and get some more of those, because those are pretty tasty.
You got a lovely baseball field
grill.
there. Target Field's a nice little place to see a game.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. All right, Chris Newmarker. Thanks again. And thanks everyone for joining us on the Device Talks Weekly Podcast.
Take care, everybody.